Hey, Brandon.
Hey.
What you doing, man?
Cleaning my fingernails. You should see this thing, man. This thing gets
This
under
thing
your
is a
nail bed.
2,000-year-old artifact that's a holy relic to a lot of people that was in a...
It's a masterpiece.
Yeah, Brandon, there's a reason we had that sealed.
Dude,
It's
let me
on
see your
loan from the
fingernails.
Vatican right now, Brandon.
Let me see your fingernails.
How about this? How about let's just let's put that back right here in this evidence
Dude, I
bag.
got 2 more nails.
Yeah, I can get you something else. How about we don't touch things in here unless we wear the proper gloves and make sure that everything's
I thought that was the
preserved
point of them
for the
sending us
future.
all that paperwork with this stuff when they sent it.
No.
So that we could do whatever we wanted to with it.
No, the purpose of that was liability, to say that we're liable for anything that happens to it. So,
All
all
right.
right. What got you to work so early this morning, man?
I was just coming to get started on this. There's a lot of stuff, man.
Yeah.
That I think we've got all the evidence, right?
Mm-hmm.
We've gone through that. Well, the trial checked out. You
Yeah.
know what I mean?
Yeah.
The execution, airtight.
Yeah.
Like, nobody could touch that. But there's still something. I couldn't sleep last night. There's one major problem.
Yeah. The body. There's a missing body. And you know, we're just going to make our way through it. We're going to keep working the evidence, doing it right.
No body, no crime, though.
Well,
Unless it's not a crime at all.
yeah. That's one of the most important pieces to it. So if this is the last one and there is no body, there is no crime, then we just lean into logic, and we've got to trust that if it's
the last one of your theories that you shared Sunday, think about this.
well, we still got theories we got to work through, man. We got the wrong tomb, stolen body, mass hysteria. All of this has to be walked out, man, because there's a lot of people with reason to be skeptics. And so we want to approach each piece logically and conclusively.
But if it turns out to be the last one,
Yeah. Yeah.
the resurrection, this case is going to change everything.
Yeah, and you know what? Cool piece about this is if we follow the evidence and it changes everything, then we've proved that's what it's always been about. We just keep following the evidence. We keep holding to the truth, no matter how hard it may be for some to understand. Hey, you didn't touch any other evidence while you were in here, though, right? I mean, just the spear.
Hey, Matt. Matt. Oh, we have got to do something with these. We should color these. You can hardly see what's on them. It's an ancient yo-yo.
All right. I could have swore I had that cat of nine tails in a different place. Huh. All right, you guys ready to continue our investigation? You guys ready? Have you been doing your homework? All right, one of the key pieces of this is everything we cover, you have pieces of it at home. And so as you're digging in, as you're making these connections, it's not like you're just coming to church and somebody's telling you. You're doing this research with us. We're a team, right? So as we go into, I want to recap real quick. We've established in week 1 that Jesus, through biblical and non-biblical evidence, through history and testimony, that he lived. He lived during the time the Bible says he lived. He was crucified under Pontius Pilate at the hands of the Romans, and that he did it during the time of Passover, just as the Bible says. That's critical evidence to whether or not Jesus Christ was murdered or if he's innocent and what the charges are. In week 2, we looked at the swoon theory. Could Jesus have survived this execution, especially in the time that he lived? And if he did survive, could he ever be physically able to pass as a resurrected Messiah ever again? And we looked at it medically, we looked at it forensically, and we realized there's no way this man, he was walking around and it was either a resurrection or it's a hoax. But there's no way this guy survived that, especially in those days, and there's no way he passed as a healthy person afterwards. And so this week, we're going to jump into the rest of the theories about what happened to Jesus' body, because the tomb is empty and there's either a resurrection or there's a hoax. And as we go through, one of the pieces that's been important was we know he wasn't an insurrectionist, so that charge was bogus. And we know, according to the Jewish law, they could not crucify him without ample evidence that he wasn't the Messiah. And their prophecies so far have pointed towards him being the Messiah. And so if he is their Messiah, could he resurrect? And is there truth to that? Or was the body stolen? Did they have the wrong tomb? What kind of a hoax could have taken place to convince this many people still today that this guy resurrected? And so we're going to look into the first theory. First theory is the wrong tomb. All right, so everybody say wrong. All right, now from this point on, in your own head, not out loud, but in your own head, every time something seems off, I want you to just kind of think wrong. But before you do that, I want you to weigh the evidence with I don't want you to be biased. I want you to weigh the evidence and use logic and history as we go through this. So the wrong tomb is kind of a modern theory. It's not an ancient theory. It's a modern theory. And one of the reasons for this is because there are 2 tombs in Israel today. One we would call the Orthodox tomb or the ancient tomb, and one we would call the Protestant tomb because it was found later. We'll dig into that. But what I think is important now is to look back in history at what people always believed. Now, one of the biblical pieces that we have to look into this is this man, Joseph of Arimathea. Joseph of Arimathea was a member of the Sanhedrin. He was wealthy and he was a prominent figure. Now, the Bible says that Joseph had Jesus' body taken and placed in his own tomb. So if it were the wrong tomb, let's just take a second and think about Joseph. One, what would make this prominent member of the Sanhedrin, who was a wealthy person, risk everything, his position, his trade, his finances, to bury this criminal in his own tomb, which would desecrate his tomb, right? So let's look at it a little bit deeper. If I were a celebrity, a wealthy person, or a politician today, would I be buried in just a regular cemetery or a high-end cemetery? If I had a family graveyard, would it be that if I was a celebrity, you would be able to find where my grave was? So like Elvis Presley, we can go to Graceland, we can find his grave. Whether you think he lived or he faked it or whatever, never knew Elvis and Jesus had so much in common, right? For my generation, Tupac. For some of y'all, Michael Jackson. And the rest of y'all, you will have your own, okay? But the thing of it is, I want you to look at this. None of those people that people believe faked their death have changed the world through that story. Yet we can say where their graves are to this day. It's not hard to find their graves because prominent people have prominent graves. And it doesn't take much to say, hey, where did this famous person or this wealthy person or this politician, where's their grave at? And so as we dig into this, it wouldn't be hard to say where the wealthy people are buried and where the criminals are buried. It would not be hard to figure out this location. Another thing I want to look into is Jesus' enemies acknowledged the tomb was empty. So if it had just been his disciples were spreading rumors that Jesus resurrected and left the tomb and there was an angel, why would Jesus' enemies acknowledge the tomb was empty and help play into the story of the resurrection? Now, if we look at Matthew 28, we're going to start with verse 12. When the chief priests had met with elders and devised a plan, they gave the soldiers a large sum of money. Now, I want you to weigh this with me because this is a biblical source we're pulling this information from, but the Talmud actually reinforces everything but the bribe, okay? So other than confessing I bribed someone to lie, I'm confessing to the rest of it. You ever have a kid get caught and they have to tell part of the truth on something, but they leave pieces of the truth out? Let's take it off of the kid for a second. Anybody in here ever get guilty of having to tell part of the truth? That's why when we give our testimony, this is the truth and nothing but the truth, so help me God. The whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help me God, because we want the whole story. They do confirm the tomb was empty, and I want you to see what they build off of this. You are to say his disciples came during the night and stole him away while we were asleep. Now, that sounds pretty secure, right? That's logical. That's still out there today. It says, if this report gets to the governor, we'll satisfy him and keep you out of trouble. So this was decreed by Pilate. They could secure this tomb. And if Rome's name's attached to this now, and you get caught with a body leaving, you're going to be in deep water. And so we're going to cover up for you. We're going to pay you. And then I want you to see this part. So the soldiers took the money and did as they were instructed. And the story has been widely circulated among the Jews to this very day, and still to this day. Now, on the surface, it would be feasible that somebody stole the body, right? On the surface, it would be feasible that somebody would steal the body. And there's a couple pieces we really need to dig into. And the first one I want to dig into is, were these soldiers, Roman soldiers, as Hollywood and every passion play has ever shown, or were these temple guards? Now, the reason we get this is it comes from Matthew 27. So again, from the biblical account, because we want to understand some context, but to this point, the historical pieces have all lined up with the Bible. It's not been off with any yet. So we're going to lean into this to look for evidence. Verse 62 says, the next day, the one after preparation day, the chief priests and the Pharisees went to Pilate. So this is the previous chapter. Sir, they said, we remember that while he was still alive, that deceiver said, after 3 days, I will rise again. So even they knew Jesus said he would rise again. Jesus had tied his resurrection, his promise of resurrection, to ancient prophecies that were lining up at this point. These are scholars over ancient prophecies, and right now they're saying, hey, he's saying that he'll resurrect after 3 days. If that happens, look at this. So give the order for the tomb to be made secure until the third day. Otherwise, his disciples may come and steal the body and tell the people that he has been raised from the dead. The last deception will be worse than the first. So if this happens, it will align with prophecy. And at this point, they're starting to put together a lot of prophecies are aligning with this guy. And it's been at our hand, these prophecies are aligning. So this is that moment where we're going to stop something from happening. They're identifying stuff's lining up here. Have you ever been in a situation to where you really don't want the outcome to be you're guilty? And in this moment, they've gone to Pilate and they're like, we need you to seal the tomb and we need to make sure it's secured and we need guards. Now, verse 65 says this, take a guard, Pilate answered. Go make the tomb as secure as you know how. So they went and made the tomb secure by putting a seal on the stone and posting the guard. Now, this is a legally sealed tomb. The best way I can describe this would be today, if you saw crime scene, do not enter. If you cross over into an active crime scene, there's a penalty coming, okay? Now, this is also something that is staking the reputation of Rome and Jerusalem. But I want to lean into a translational piece here, because every modern translation, Pilate's going to say, take a guard and make it secure. But if we go back, and I just have to bring this out because we have to look at all the evidence. If we translate this directly from the Greek, he says, you have a guard. Do your best to secure it. Now, the chief priests had what was called a temple guard. Historically, we don't tend to think about those guys because when we translate a lot of the Bible, we're thinking about it much later. And it can mean both. We have to be honest, it can mean both. But it opens up two possibilities. Either A, Pilate is saying, okay, you got one, or he's saying, you already have yours. I'm done with this, I'm not getting in it anymore. Which would fit with him washing his hands, saying, I'm innocent. But it does bring a huge significance to whether or not Romans were guarding the tomb or temple guards were guarding the tomb. Both of these, we see that the chief priests are saying, if you'll tell this story, we'll pay you and we'll cover with you with Pilate. But see, here's the thing. If the Roman guards said they fell asleep and somebody was able to steal the body, one, now they could be killed or possibly crucified because they allowed this to happen on their watch. How diligent do you think Roman guards would be in finding the body? I think if it was my life on the line, I'd be going house to house, door to door, and I would interrogate everybody as thoroughly as I could. Now, I also want to point out this. There are over 2 million people in this little town of Jerusalem during the time of Passover. Imagine cramming 2 million people into Aner, South Carolina. And you see what I'm saying? And Aner is bigger, right? So imagine cramming 2 million people into that and spewing out into the surrounding areas. And Jesus' tomb would be just outside the city wall. Imagine if Jesus is buried in this tomb and it's where the prominent people are buried. And now imagine this, there are officers of the law guarding this. Now, everybody here has been to the Kangaroo when the police pull up. You know where the popo's at. Matter of fact, Walmart, all of us have been checking out and we've watched the cops show up to get somebody at Walmart. Some people, that's their ride home, right? And all of us have been driving down 501 and there's the blue lights and there's a car pulled over, and what's our instinct? Right? We slow down and stop traffic just because we want to see if we know anybody over there. So 2 million people crammed into a tight space, right? Strike that first part. 2 million people cramped into a tight space with law enforcement involved with it, guarding it at a prominent grave, a new grave. And you don't think there was anybody in the entire place that could say, hey, yeah, I saw something suspicious happening over there. Whether they took the body, where'd they hide it? How do you sneak a body past 2 million people without that? People identify a body. At least a big thing of laundry that took several people to carry it. Or if they were to burn the body. Cremation was much different back then than it is today. That was a long process, and people knew what it was like to see a fire randomly burning somewhere. Logically speaking. Now let's look at it like this. If it was the Romans, they would look for every piece of evidence. Could they be bribed and saved? I don't know that they could, possibly. But if it was the temple guard, they were fully faithful to their priests. And with a large sum of money, these guys could have been relocated and gotten away. But if there is any inconsistencies with this story, somebody has to share. They have to tell something. And we don't have any inconsistencies with the followers of Jesus. The body went somewhere else. But somehow the Bible writers through history have a recount of what the guards saw when Jesus resurrected. Somebody did speak, and it was recorded. And logically, you would think if we were in a situation to where Jesus' disciples had done this, you would think somebody there could be convinced. We'll talk about that more as we go into it. But even if the disciples had the wrong tomb and said he was resurrected, do you not think the Romans, the high priest, or anybody could have said, no, it's actually in this tomb, here's the body. Let me go pull the body out. Let me exhume the body. Let me prove that's a lie. So I want to show you a historical proof of how we know today where the body of Jesus was and how they would have known where Jesus' body was. There was an emperor named Hadrian over the Roman Empire. Now, Jesus had prophesied that the city of Jerusalem would be destroyed. It would be destroyed. And honestly, this ties with past prophecy. On the 9th of Av, the temple was destroyed by Babylon. On the 9th of Av, the temple was destroyed in 70 AD by Rome, as Jesus prophesied it would be. Now, when this happened, the city was desolate. The people were removed from the city. It became a wasteland. So everybody say desolate. This is historical truth. This is not biblical story. This is all history. You can research it. So Titus in 70 AD destroys Rome, burns the temple. They take the wealth of the temple. They take it to Rome. There is a Titus arch that still stands in Rome that shows them carrying the articles of the temple. And that wealth of the temple built the Roman Colosseum under Vespasian, the emperor of Rome. Historical facts still documented and standing in Rome. Everybody with me still? So this Hadrian, who becomes a later emperor, looks at this wasteland and says that would be a perfect place to put our soldiers because no one lives there. It's all overgrown now, there's nothing. And so he takes what the Temple Mount is and what Jerusalem is and builds a military outpost. And I want to share with you, it's called the Aeola Capitolina. And I'm going to put an image up with a map of it real quick so we can walk through this. If you look at the square up at the top, that is the Temple Mount. Now, the temple was completely destroyed. It was completely wiped out. No stone left on top of another because the gold that was adorning the temple melted into the cracks and they had to separate each stone to get all of the gold out. So Hadrian comes and builds a temple to Jupiter. Jupiter, the god of the Romans. And this place is built right where the temple of God had stood. And inside the holy place of this temple is a statue to Hadrian, the god, the Roman emperor as a god people would come and make sacrifices to. And all over the Temple Mount, he would make sacrifices. Now, do you know why they would put idols all over the Temple Mount? To desecrate this place. And they put an altar in the temple that was built here to desecrate the place where people had worshiped God, completely destroying the people of this land's faith. But he built another temple. If you look up to the center, going up on the far right-hand hill there, you see what is called the Temple of Aphrodite. The Temple of Aphrodite. Aphrodite is a Greek goddess name, not what the Romans worshiped, but she's known as the goddess of love. So why would a bunch of Roman soldiers worship this female deity of love, AKA a house of prostitution tied to religion? And where did he choose to put a place to a pagan god of love that would desecrate it with prostitution? Over the burial and resurrection site claimed by Christians to be where Jesus was, where they could verify the tomb. People are like, well, there's no tomb there today. It's because it desecrated it, and when Constantine's mother came, they had to tear all of the desecrated stone away, and they built a church. It would be for the resurrection side of Jesus. Historically speaking, we've never questioned which tomb. But later, some people found a rock cliff that had what looked like could be construed as a skull and a garden tomb, and they said, okay, we can sell tickets here. And it's beautiful. It's awesome to see. I want to share with you, I went to Israel recently, and I want to share with you, I saw all kinds of tombs while I was there. One of them was just on the side of the road. This is just an ancient tomb that's sitting there. You just drive right by it, and people throw their trash right through that little hole. But there was nobody in there. So this is actually, listen, I believe in getting hands-on. I don't know that you're supposed to do this. I would not recommend doing this because they did not get happy when I did this. But this is some of the adjoining tombs where Jesus was buried, some tombs that were scattered around the area. And so I went in there just to make sure he's not there. And so this is the garden tomb, and I went there, and he's not there. But there is something that happens. Sometimes there are grave robbers, and the reason there are no bodies in these places is because the bodies get stolen. And so we know which tomb was there. It wasn't the wrong tomb. Let's look at this. Was the body stolen? And when bodies are stolen, they don't typically steal bodies and ossuaries as the Jewish people would have. They don't typically just steal the body. They steal all the valuable objects people are buried with. Well, Jesus was wrapped in expensive linen and had expensive oils and perfumes around him. And guess what was still there? Linens, oils, and perfumes. They just took the body. They didn't even take the wrapping the body was in. Grave robbers wouldn't do that. His enemies wouldn't have taken the body and hidden it without putting it out in front of everybody so they could see it. And let me ask you this. Why would the disciples who were so scared when when he was arrested that they ran and they hid become so bold in this moment to come back and overpower trained guards to be able to take this body? And how did they break the seal and roll this heavy stone away without waking some soldiers up? I'm just saying, man. Logically, it's not fitting when we know this tomb was sealed and guarded. There's no reason for it. I want to just look at this for a second. Let's look at the people that they're claiming would have done this. So let's take Peter. Peter denied Jesus 3 times the night Jesus was arrested when Jesus had not yet been crucified while he was alive. Why did he deny him? He denied even knowing him. First, it was a servant girl came up, then another guy came up, then another guy came up. And I mean, they're saying, you talk like the guy, you look like the guy. And Peter swears, I didn't know him. He makes 3 bold denials. I did not know him, right? All these things Jesus said he would do. I just want to ask you a couple questions. How does a guy that's so scared of being arrested with Jesus see the man get crucified and watch all the evidence we walk through, and then after that say, you know what, I'll stick with a lie and I won't deny the lie and I'll get crucified myself? I'm going to tell you right now, if it's a lie and you got me getting ready to crucify me, I'll be like, hey, let's make a deal. I want immunity. I'm fixing to testify on all these liars out here. But he doesn't. Why? What would have given this man such boldness? And what would have given him boldness to be able to go in and begin this lie? Let's look at it like this. You couldn't find one person out of his followers, if he was dead and we stole the body and all this pressure and all this death was looming over us, that you could pay to be able to say this guy was fake. Now just think about this. One of the 12 closest followers of Jesus betrayed him for 30 pieces of silver while he was alive, before he was arrested, while he was in his prime, and everybody loved him. So I could find one guy out of 12 to betray him while he was alive, but after he's dead and I know it and we're lying about it, you can't pay one of thousands of people that begin following him to say, this is all bull. Just think through. What makes these people willing to die based off of this? So it moves me to my next theory. Maybe it was mass hallucinations. I don't know why they use the word hallucinations. I would have gone mass hysteria, but it's hallucinations. This is the theory. So I want to dig into this. Maybe they were grief-stricken. Maybe it was hysteria. Maybe it was just a bunch of people all extremely deprived of sleep and at the emotional peak, and they all just envisioned Jesus the same way. Here's the problem, though. If we look at it from psychology and psychiatry, both of these practices tell us that hallucinations are private experiences, not communally shared. I'm not talking about hysteria. I'm talking about hallucinations. So I want you to see, Paul testifies in 1 Corinthians 15. In verse 3, it says, for what I received, I pressed on to you as first importance, that Christ died for our sins according to the Scriptures, so that he was buried, that he was raised on the 3rd day according to the Scriptures. Notice he's saying according to prophecy, according to ancient prophecy. And that he appeared to Cephas. This is Peter. And then to the 12. And this is so the other followers they're there. And that he appeared to more than 500 of the brothers and sisters at the time, most of whom at Paul's time, he says, were still living. What he's saying here is it's verifiable. Go talk to them. They all saw him. Though some have fallen asleep. Then he says this, then he appeared to James. Now James is Jesus' brother who denied him and was a skeptic of him. And he's saying now James sees this, and we look later and we're going to find out about James James becomes a believer, but an extreme believer to the point of death. And then he says, last of all, he appeared to me also as one abnormally born. Now, we know who this man named Paul is because we can trace him back and know he was a man named Saul, who was also an official of the Pharisees, in good with the Sanhedrin and the chief priests. And he was a jihadist against Christianity. He was persecuting Christians, men, women, and children to their death. What would make someone who's so against Christianity flip to be so for Christianity that he would die for it? Man, if we were looking at any other case in the world right now, we'd be like, something had to happen. But this is where our allegiance can overwhelm us and we can just move past it, or our skepticism and our denial of Jesus can put us to a place where it's like, I don't care. So if there are these many people that see this, there is a thing that's not quite fully accepted, but it's presented, and it's called Jerusalem syndrome. Jerusalem syndrome is this thing where people, they're so excited and so longing and so want something so badly to be true that they go to Jerusalem and they're expecting this holy, holy, holy experience. And they get there and they say, oh, I saw this, this happened to me, this experience changed me. And the thing about Jerusalem syndrome is none of them line up with the other ones. There's not a mass movement of people having Jerusalem syndrome at the same time. It's one-off accounts, and they all are different from each other. The only thing I can think of that we could probably look at and say was mass illusion, mass hallucination, where we would see something that seems to identify would maybe be Bigfoot. All right? But if you do your homework and go backwards, Bigfoot has evolved over time to where now what we think we say we see of Bigfoot looks like what's already promoted and put on billboard and put on cups, coffees, and shirts. But the original sightings of Bigfoot were completely different, and that's not what we see right there. It's like the Grinch with a ski mask. Or Uncle Teddy the day after Thanksgiving. But here's the thing. They may have a consensus of what people say they see, that it never becomes the mass consensus like Christianity does out the world. And it never creates a movement impact. Only Jesus' story did that. That's evidence. So I don't think there's any credible psychological theory out there that can account for this many people that impact the world in a world-changing way to have the same story and to die for it. So we got to lean into, is there evidence of the resurrection? So what's the wrong tomb? If it wasn't stolen body, it wasn't hallucination. What is this, if we want to call it a myth or a truth, that has become a movement based on a miraculous hope or a reality? So here's the things. If I was going to build a movement, if I was going to build faith, today, I don't want to look at how I would do it today. I want to go back and look at when this was started and think, what would give credibility? So first, I go back 2,000 years, and I want to look at the culture around Jerusalem with the Jewish people and the Roman people. And I want to look and I want to see, what is the culture of them? What do they believe? What are the things that give influence? What are the things that give credibility? How would I speak a message that all people are going to draw into, right? So Jesus' story is completely different than any other teaching or there, but his methodology, look at Matthew 28, verse 1 through 10. It starts with women. The Jewish people would never accept testimony of authority coming from women. We live in 2025, and I know the world's changed. But 2,000 years ago, it wasn't. And the Romans did not give credibility to what women said. So I was going to start it like this. After the Sabbath at dawn, the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary went to look at the tomb. There was a violent earthquake, for an angel of the Lord had come down from heaven, going to the tomb, rolled back the stone, and sat on it. His appearance was like lightning, his clothes were white as snow. The guards were so afraid of him that they shook and became like dead men. The angel said to the women, "Do not be afraid, for I know that you are looking for Jesus who was crucified. He's not here, he's risen, just as he said. Come and see the place where he lay." Can we just take a second here and realize the Jewish leaders expected something to happen within 3 days while Jesus' followers were coming looking for a dead body? Why would you admit that? He's not here, he's risen, just as he said, come and see the place where he lay. Then go quickly and tell his disciples, he's risen from the dead. He's going ahead of you into Galilee. There you will see him. Now I've told you. Now just think about this. If I wanted credibility in those days, I'm not starting it with women. I'm starting it with men. Because women's testimony has to be validated by men. Notice how this is being set up. Women and then men. The women hurried away from the tomb, afraid yet filled with joy, and ran to his disciples. Suddenly Jesus met them. Greetings, he said. They came to him, clasped his feet, and worshiped him. Then Jesus said to them, do not be afraid. Go and tell my brothers to go to Galilee. There they will see me. Now, just think about this. Culturally speaking, this actually hurts our story because it's built on the testimony of women. But biblically speaking, what has God always been doing? He's been taking those that are viewed as least, and he's been exalting them. How did Jesus tell John the Baptizer's disciples the proof that he was the Messiah? The lame walk, the blind see, mute speak, the dead raise, and the poor have the gospel. When Jesus was born, was it a palace? Or was it in a little town of poverty? And who did they send to come and testify about his birth? Not the affluent with power in their testimony, but shepherds. That's the biblical story, that God exalts the lowly and gives credibility to them. So if you're a woman today and you've been raised to think the Bible's anti-woman, you got that backwards. Every right and freedom today for females has been justified because of the word of Jesus. All right. Next thing I want to look at is the Roman culture. So let's look at the Alexamenos graffito. All right, now in this is the oldest picture of somebody's depiction of Jesus, and it's actually a mockery. It was graffiti that was put on a wall in a pretty prominent, wealthy Roman area. And you see a Jewish man standing here worshiping another man on the cross with the head of a donkey, like the head of an ass, okay? And so the words under it says, Alexamenos worships his God. Now, we have multiple records of before the Nicene Council, Jesus being referenced as God, right? So if you read the Da Vinci Code and that's still the argument you got, flush that, right? Flush that. That's a fictional story. We're basing this off of history. So why did they mock him like this? Because nobody would worship a crucified Savior. No religion at this point would ever have a God that would humble himself and go through this kind of suffering. So it was a mockery to people, like, you worship a what? You actually worship a guy that was crucified? That's a joke. You would not build a religion or a movement off of this story, making that your creative liberty. Let's look at the transformation of the disciples we talked about. These cowards who were hiding and running and denying. Let me ask you a question. Why, if you were making a lie up about a religion, would you tell all your flaws? Think about this. Anybody in this room lie downward, or do you lie upward? Was your fish this big or this big? Did you sing bad, or did you just nail it? We lie up. These guys are telling stories that put them down. I want you to think about this, man. We talked about Peter, what about Thomas? Who said, unless I touch him. See, a hallucination can't be touched. A hallucination can't eat with you. A hallucination doesn't walk 7 miles with you like we talked about last week. But this was physical touch, where Thomas, a believer of Jesus, is a skeptic who hears the testimony of others, and he's like, I ain't gonna believe no matter what you say until I do it for myself. But at least he was willing to try, and Jesus shows up and he's like, hey, Thomas, touch me. Thomas is like, I don't have to. He's like, you believe because you see, but blessed are they who believe that have not seen. What about this, man? Thomas died in India. Why would he build a religion where he's sitting here saying, I was a doubter and a skeptic, but now I believe? But if it was a lie, why would he die in India so far away from home when he could have just looked at the king of India and said, no, that's misunderstanding? Logic. Not one person. Jesus' brothers in John 7, at verse 5, says, for even his own brothers did not believe in him. Mark 3, verse 21. When his family heard about this, they went to take charge of him, for they said, he is out of his mind. And yet James, something happens. The Bible says Jesus showed himself to him. Something happens where James goes from saying he's out of his mind and not believing him to where James is willing to write a book of the Bible, stake his reputation on his fallen brother, and die for it. How many of y'all would die for your brother's lie? Man, me and Brandon would get caught in front of Dad and stuff, and we were together until the switch came out. You know what I mean by the switch? Go pick your own, be like, no, you're on your own, bro. Brandon stole it. I was with you till the switch came out. Other religions, man. All these people that die for their faith, you don't see people dying for other religions like that. Because all these other religions, man, they got problems. They ain't got no resurrection. They got reincarnations. They got reimaginings. These guys changed. But here's the thing. If you just use Google right now, you'll find other religions that predate Jesus where they have very mirroring stories of Jesus. But here's the thing. Keep digging. Don't let Google be your guide. You'll find that every one of those stories changed years and years and years after the influence of the story of Jesus came. And they mirrored his story to give credibility back to their faith. The original stories were never like Jesus. He changed even the religious world. And we look at religions today, man, people are like, all religions are the same. Buddhism it offers a path of enlightenment through a detachment of self-realization, but it denies a personal creator God who does not claim a bodily resurrection of its founder, Gautama Buddha. He died. It's not the same. Islam, it honors Jesus as a prophet. They call him Isa, but they deny the crucifixion because they will not have an important figure that would die for you. They do not see God as your father because he's too good for us. He's too far above us. He would never die for us. They believe he went up to heaven without dying. Hinduism says, yeah, there are many gods out there, and your job is to keep dying and recycling and being born again as different things. But it's an endless cycle of coming back to the dirt, back to the dirt, back to the dirt. Greek mythology, man, Greek mythology, you know what that is? The only time those gods interacted with us was for their own pleasure. But they'd come and seduce women or come in to play tricks on men. There's only one God who would create us in his image and give us that. Who would make us out of the dirt and then get down in the dirt with us to show his love for us. They would claim family rights to us. Listen. I want you to see this. In Genesis 2, verse 7, it says, we are made from dust. God took creation and created us. Then when sin came into the world, he made the punishment of the snake to crawl in the dust, to slither in the dust, to eat the dust. That was a humbling, that statement means you are low, you are brought down to the very bottom. And so then the first prophecy of God giving us deliverance is Genesis 3:15, where it says the descendant who would be born of this dust creation would come, and the serpent would strike his heel, but he would crush his head, overcoming the dust. See, in the Old Testament, there was a patriarch, an ancestor of the faith named Jacob, who doubted, who wrestled with his faith, who struggled with his faith. And so God came down in Genesis 32, and it says he wrestled with him, but the direct translation is he got in the dust with him so this man could find his faith. See, according to the law and according to our world still today, if I touch things that are unclean, I get unclean. According to the law, if I touched someone that was a leper or a bleeding woman or a sinful person, if I touched them, I became unclean. I want to show you what happened. See, Jesus came and he got in the dust. And the leper in Matthew 8:3, when Jesus touched the leper, instead of Jesus becoming unclean, the leper became clean. When we look at the bleeding woman who nobody could help, if Jesus touched her, according to everything, he should become unclean. But when she touched him, according to Mark 5:28 and 29, she became clean. He flipped it. The sinful woman that washed his feet in Luke 7:44. While other people mocked this and judged Jesus for this, Jesus forgave her. she became clean. See, he came to the dust, and without getting dirty, he cleaned us. On the cross, he bled into the dust. He was buried beneath the dust into a tomb. And then he resurrected so that we can be cleansed eternally, no longer the dust, but resurrected as his family exalted high through him. There's no religion does that. Nothing. Logically, man. So I want you to get this, man. The prophecies were fulfilled by Jesus himself when he said, he has assigned his place in the wicked in Isaiah 53:9. And with the rich, he was buried in his death. That's fulfilled in Matthew 27, verse 57 through 60. Jonah's picture of being consumed through death in the belly of a whale and then resurrecting as he goes to Nineveh. If you don't know that story, I'm giving it to you. It's the book of Jonah. It's really easy to find. Jesus says in Matthew 12:40, just like that, my sign to you will be that I'll be in the belly of the earth for 3 days beneath the dust, and I'll resurrect for you. Psalm 113:7 says, he raises the poor from the dust and lifts the needy from the ash heap. In Genesis 3:19, the condemnation of sin is you are dust and to dust you'll return. But the fulfillment of salvation is that you are dust, but through Jesus you have eternal life. Man, all right. I wish we had more time, and I thank you so much for giving me the time we've had. Continue to dig in this at home, because if Jesus lived and he died and everything else fits and all the prophecies fit, then maybe there's a resurrection we need to be giving some credence to. And I want to say why this matters. See, we can have the historical evidence, we can have the physical evidence, we can have the medical evidence, we can have the archaeological evidence. But here's the thing we wrestle with. Every skeptic, I've done it, I've been there too. Every skeptic in this room, we wrestle with this one word, supernatural. The supernatural matters. And it's like, but this is a resurrection, man. How do you prove a resurrection? I refuse to believe in a resurrection. And so what I want to say is this. If we define supernatural, it means anything that exists beyond or outside the observable laws of nature. Something that can not be fully explained by science, logic, or the physical universe as we currently understand it. Remember that word I told you to hold on to? Yet. So we say, I can't believe the supernatural. Well, how about this? How about we just walk through some things that you probably already accept and have faith in, and many people have faith in that are supernatural today that you don't think about. Quantum mechanics and the interpretation of. How is it that there can be two particles completely isolated, yet they impact each other in different ways and times, and then they move together, and there's a controlling factor between them? Observation of this shows us a reality that transcends normal cause and effect laws, yet we can't explain it. It's supernatural. But you know what? My Bible tells me there's a God who's a creator of everything that causes effect here, and they work together. I'm just saying logic. There's only one source that gives an explanation for that before we even understood this. How about dark matter and dark energy? 95% of our universe is made up of dark matter. What expands the galaxies is dark energy. We know these exist, but we have no way of being able to understand them. Yet the Bible talks of a spiritual realm that is all around us, that affects all things, and that God is stretching out the heavens through his magnificent power. Science says there's no answer, it's supernatural. The Bible's saying, yes, it's supernatural, but God's the answer. Before we ever knew what dark matter was. How about this? String theory. That all matter is made up of tiny vibrating strings, that there are 11 dimensions, and that we can't fathom all these dimensions because we're a four-dimensional being, and that somehow everything is tied together and has a purpose that works together, but we don't know how it happens. And yet God says he knit us together. And he works with us together, and all things are connected through and by him, and that he is in control of all things. How about this? Anthropic principle that ties from that. And that's the saying that this whole galaxy is in a perfect balance that's not too far to the left or the right, and life can be sustained on this one little rock in the middle of the galaxy. And we say something or someone must exist that keeps it together, or else it's all just the luckiest crapshoot that ever existed. I know a source before we understood what the word anthropic meant that said, hey, tap, tap, that's me. And it's supernatural. But you don't deny that. Many people believe in the Big Bang. I got one question that keeps coming up. What was before that? See, I believe in the beginning, there was a God who created. But science cannot explain how nothing creates something. And God said, I was before, I am, and I will be. I'm eternal. I'm not trying to make you believe with me or cheer with me. I'm trying to say this is logical. If there was an answer to what we're finding and we still don't have the answer, then maybe the guy that talked about it before we even had a concept of it had some idea of what it was. And maybe if we can believe in those things without being able to define, those supernaturals can exist. Maybe a simple thing as this guy raising someone from the dead can exist. All right. Whew, I try to stay non-biased, man. Let me close with this. It's either all wrong or there's truth to it. And I pray that the reason we are skeptics or the reason we deny isn't just because we don't want the answer to be Him. Some of y'all know Him. Some of y'all are scared to death of Him. Some of us are mad at Him. But the problem is we're all basing so much of what we believe and think about Him off of what the world has done. And we need to seek Him and, like Thomas, try to touch Him. Come to Him. If it's logic, it's logic. And my thing is this, if you know Him, I want to challenge you. Something we do every Easter here as a church is on Resurrection Day, when this series ends, we begin 40 days of if we believe in Him, if all of this is true, and if this is what our faith is in, then He gave us one command. Go make disciples, spread this, share this, right? But the average Christian does not make disciples. And so as a church, our whole church comes together every Resurrection Day and says, for 40 days, just like after Jesus' resurrection, He showed Himself to 500 people, preparing disciples that would go make disciples. And so we take 40 days, and here's what we do. You ain't got to be perfect. All you got to do is say, I want to take this step, and I'm going to ask one person to take it with me. We're just going to find our way to Jesus one step at a time. I don't have to be better than you. I don't have to be further than you. I just got to be like, as we go, let's go. If I stumble over here and I've got you right here, I'm like, here's a hole. Come on, man. Step around this. Let's get over this together. So we got a book. It's in the lobby. You can buy it if you want to buy it, but here's why we sell it. It's free if you can't. We sell it so we can give more away free. It's the 40-day discipleship. It is 40 questions about Jesus and being a Christian. And it's just answering those questions with Scripture, walking through it together. Start preparing yourself. Every person in this room that believes in Jesus is called to make disciples. We can do this together. What greater way to show the world the resurrection than the resurrected testimony inside of us as the church? That's the commission, man. Keep digging. Go home, keep researching. We'll put it online after this service is over. The next file will unlock. But I'm begging you, if there's a chance it's real and you doubt today, don't leave with doubt. If there's a chance for you, it's real. And if you know, then affirm it, step up and live it. Thank you for giving me so much time, and I'll see you guys next week on Cross-Examination.